Hey guys, it's Edwin here, and today I'd like to share with you on why you may blame yourself so much after leaving a toxic relationship. A common norm for most survivors of abuse is blaming themselves for what happened in the relationship, and in turn, they find themselves in this cycle of self blame where they think that everything is their fault. Instead of course, the abuser taking ownership for their abusive behaviors and ruining the relationship, the victim find themselves in this cycle of taking ownership and responsibility over things they don't even have control over. And if you've been in a toxic relationship, you may find yourself in this saddening and depressing state, and coupled up with the fact that you've also been betrayed by someone you loved. When someone is in this cycle of self-blame, they will try to twist every situation in the relationship so that it looks like it was their fault. Someone might have thoughts like, I always ruin everything in my life. I should not have talked back at them when they were shouting at me. I should have just kept quiet so that to save the relationship. Most people are saying that she's better off without me, and that's true because I'm a bad person. Or things like, I've failed as a mother or a father. I should not have left that relationship. It's more like you just twist any situation so that it looks like you are to blame for what happened. And that's the cycle of self blame. The main cause of self blame for every victim of abuse comes from the fact that they've been constantly called out that everything is all their fault in the relationship, and they've believed that as true. Toxic partners distort someone's sense of reality through gaslighting and various manipulative techniques to the point that the victim cannot rely on their own truth, and they find themselves relying more on the perceptions of their abusive partner. It's more like they cannot fully believe in themselves, and instead they'll rely on what their partner is saying. So that's why you may find yourself blaming yourself so much, but that's not your authentic voice. It's just the voice of your partner telling you that you are always doing the wrong things, you are always ruining things. It's just that voice which really amplifies the fact that you find yourself blaming yourself so much. They'll convince the victim that they are to blame for everything, or that the abuse is not happening, to the point that someone who's been in a manipulative relationship will find those statements as those false statements as facts. What reinforces this self-blame is the fact that manipulative people with their superficial charm will be liked by other people. And this fact that they are being liked by other people will trigger thoughts like, everyone likes them, I must be the problem. One factor which may also add fuel to self-blame after leaving a toxic relationship is societal victim blaming. The society we live in plays part either indirectly or directly when it comes to implanting that idea that we are to blame for what happened in that relationship, especially when it comes to marriage. Some widely held norms may feel like an invisible finger is pointing at how you need to take blame for what happened. The ones pointing the finger, of course, may not know they're pointing a finger, and it may be your family, friends, church, or just the people you hang around with. You may hear awful comments like, he wasn't submissive enough, he was not providing for his family, and that's not what a real man is supposed to do. She usually dressed like an unmarried woman, or just those sort of comments which really make you feel bad about yourself and really triggers this feeling that you should have changed something in that marriage and you are the one to blame for what happened in that marriage or that relationship. These comments will really add more salt to the wound of blame you have. In fact, research shows that when something bad happens to someone, the first instinct is to blame the victim and not the one who caused the harm. That's the world we live in. Another reason on why you might tend to blame yourself after leaving a toxic relationship is toxic self-criticism. One thing with life is that we may find ourselves either unconsciously or consciously setting high standards for ourselves. We may have been brought up in that family environment where everyone expects so highly of us. It's more like that golden child who's always been getting good grades, good morals, which paint a picture of this perfect child. And if you live life with this identity of this perfect child, this step will play in your head most of the time. And when a major setback happens in your life, like now a failed relationship, you'll find yourself in this negative self-talk of, how you failed, and that you are now worthless, you are bad. When we set high standards, the consequences of failure can be wrecking, as we'll find ourselves in this cycle of overthinking that we are to blame for what happened, or that's not supposed to be happening to someone like me, or I'm supposed to be that kind of person who ensures everything is perfect and everything goes well, because you just have this identity of this perfect child. That's the reason why you might tend to blame yourself for even things you cannot control. And you might find yourself carrying a burden in your life of things you're not responsible for, or even taking ownership for things you can't do anything about. And that will mean that you will blame yourself for everything in that relationship. Another reason why you blame yourself after leaving that toxic relationship is the fact that you are too kind. You are too kind, and you'll always avoid seeing any fault in other people, and you'll prefer blaming yourself instead. You will in fact even go to an extent of just making things up so that you end up blaming yourself and forgiving the person you love. It's like you just can't imagine yourself hating the other person, and because you are not capable of assigning blame elsewhere, like you can't assign blame to anyone else, that blame you redirect it to yourself. The fact that also you are still trauma bonded means that you cannot simply fault your partner because you feel that you still love them so much. Another reason why we find ourselves in this cycle of self-blame after leaving a toxic relationship is self-blame is a very good survival response. Let me explain. You see, ending of any relationship can be is a painful experience, but there's always this thought, this niggling thought that maybe we can still make it work. This means that it will be much easier to blame ourselves than accepting that that relationship cannot and will never work. It's the part of that denial and bargaining phase where you might have thoughts like, maybe if I act this way, maybe if I change this about me, the person I love will come back. So self-blame may offer this path of least resistance, as you just can't imagine yourself starting over in this world. You can't imagine yourself being alone in this world. So it's much better to cling on the idea that this relationship might work. So let me just blame myself as the one who's at fault, but not my toxic partner, so that I can just keep myself in this cycle of this relationship will work in a way. Because the moment you realize that you're not to blame, it will mean that the blame will go to the other person. So it will mean that that person will be at fault. So it will mean that you will have to disengage from this relationship and work on yourself, which is not an easy thing. So self-blame will give you this feeling and this false sense of control and safety over the situation. It will give you this feeling that you are that this situation is under control, because you can't imagine yourself starting over, or you can't imagine yourself losing that investment you made in that past relationship. To conclude this, one thing about blame, we do blame ourselves every day in our lives in one way or the other. It's like we've been conditioned since childhood that blaming ourselves is a default response in all situations we find ourselves in. But one thing we can do is understand how destructive self-blame is in our healing journey, as it will keep you stuck in the past instead of looking at how our lives are in the present moment. Because you'll be more like, I should have done this, instead of like, I can do this, And that can really free you from that burden of responsibility and emotional baggage from the past. Here's the thing. The only thing that you are responsible for is what's happening in your life now, and not what you would have done in your past life or in your past relationship. That's why to break free from this cycle of blame is to take full responsibility of your healing journey and see things as they are in the present moment and not as they were supposed to be. Hope that makes sense, guys. Don't blame yourself so much. Don't be so hard on yourself. Be gentle on yourself, and happy healing. And hope you've found this informative. Feel free to share and comment, and have a nice evening.